Hey, second graders. So, all of this reading about nature and the wild made me feel like maybe it was time to actually come out into nature and the wild. I mean, it's not the wild like Roz is experiencing, but it's pretty wild. That was the wind knocking my Chromebook off of this log. All right, let's see if I can balance it. Perfect. So, I thought that I would go ahead and read a couple of chapters outside to you today. Roz tried her best to outrun the bears. Oh, and when we left off, Roz was running away from bears. We're on chapter 14. Yeah, chapter 14. Roz tried her best to outrun the bears. She leaped over rocks and wove through trees and stomped across the mountainside at full speed. But the bears were young and strong and fast, and the robot still had much to learn about moving through the wilderness. She never even saw the tree root. One moment she was stomping along, and the next moment she was flying through the air, thumping down into a rotten log. Clumps of soft wood stuck to her side as she stood and faced her attackers. Wouldn't you be afraid if two bears were charging towards you? Of course you would. Everyone would. Even the robot felt something like fear. Roz was programmed to take care of herself. She was programmed to stay alive. And as the robot watched those bears charging towards her, she knew her life was in serious danger. The bear slammed into Roz, knocking her against the trunk of towering trees. Then one bear dove at her legs and the other clawed at her chest. If only the robot had swung her fists or kicked her feet, she could have scared them off. One good bop in the nose would have sent them running. But the robot's programming did not allow her to be violent. Clearly, Roz was not designed to fight bears. Powerful jaws chomped at her arms. Sharp claws slashed at her face. A massive head rammed into her chest. "Please stay away," said the robot. "Rawr," said the sister bear. "Grrr," said the brother bear. And then the bears went in for the kill. But the robot had vanished. Chapter 15, The Escape. Using all the strength in her legs, Roz jumped straight up, high into the air, and landed on a tree branch overhead. The tree shook with the sudden weight of a robot, and then, thunk, thunk, two pine cones bounced off Roz, and a moment later, thunk, thunk, the same pine cones bounced off the bears below. The bears grunted with annoyance. This gave Roz an idea. The robot's programming stopped her from being violent, but nothing stopped her from being annoying. So Roz plucked pine cones from a nearby branch and lobbed them towards the bears. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Each pine cone bounced off its target with annoying accuracy and whipped the young bears into a frenzy. Let's see if I can balance this so I can turn the page. And there's a picture of Roz throwing the pine cones at the bear. "Rawr," said the sister bear. "Rawr," said the brother bear. "I do not understand you bears," said the robot. Roz was about to unload a whole armful of annoying pine cones when the distant roar echoed through the forest. Back at the cave, the mother bear was calling for these two. She did not sound happy. The young bears looked at each other. They knew they were in trouble. Before lumbering home, they glared at Roz and snorted one last time. More than anything, they wanted to get that robot. Chapter 16, The Pine Tree. Roz was in no hurry to leave the tree. She stayed on their branches for a long time after the bears had gone, enjoying some of the peace and looking herself over. In addition to bite marks, claw marks, The robot was also covered in dirt, which of course meant it was time for another cleaning. She was making good progress when she felt something sticky on her arm. The problem with sticking or sitting in a pine tree was that eventually the tree's sticky resin will find you. It always does. And it found Roz. The robot scrubbed and scraped the resin, and soon her fingers were completely coated in the sticky stuff. Then it was all over her arms, her legs, and her torso. And things were about to get even messier. A robin swooped into the tree and began screeching and fluttering around Roz. The bird had recently finished building herself a new nest, and it was a little work of art, a delicate basket woven from grass, twigs, and feathers, and it was right above the robot's head. "Screech, screech," said the robin. "I do not understand you, Robin," said the robot. The robin continued screeching and fluttering, and then splat. She splattered her droppings across the robot's face. This bird was serious. Soon, Roz scooted away, further out of the branch, until she heard a quick, sharp crack. Before Roz knew what was happening, the tree branch snapped under her weight. She went crashing to the forest floor. She hit the ground hard and lay there as the broken branches and pine cones and needles showered down on top of her. There was another splat, and then the quiet return of the forest. Chapter 17, Camouflaged Insects. Roz was a mess. She laid there under the tree, covered in a heap of broken branches and pine cones and needles. She still hadn't removed the sticky resin from her body. And then there were bird droppings. She was about to get up and give herself a rigorous cleaning when she noticed a particular twig. The twig was moving. It was crawling along one of the broken branches on the ground. And with a gentle touch, the robot picked up the twig. "Hello, stick insect. My name is Roz. You are very well camouflaged." The stick insect's body was long and thin. It had the same shape and color and markings as a real twig. But when you looked very closely, you just might see two tiny eyes and a spindly antenna. The insect didn't make a sound. He sat perfectly still as the robot. The two of them sat still and silently staring at each other for a while. "Thank you, stick insect. You have taught me an important lesson. I see how camouflage helps you survive. Perhaps it could help me survive, too." You notice Roz is learning all these new things about surviving in the forest. As you know, reader, Roz had always liked to keep herself as clean as possible, but the desire to stay alive was stronger than her desire to stay clean. And our robot decided it was time she got dirty. Roz was going to camouflage herself. She had gotten the idea from the stick insect, but Roz quickly realized that camouflaging herself as a twig was out of the question. No, the robot had to blend into the landscape itself. She began to smear handfuls of thick mud over her entire body, and then she plucked ferns and grasses from the ground and sank her roots into the muddy coating. She placed colorful flowers around her face to disguise her glowing eyes. Any bare patches were covered with tree leaves and strips of moss. Our robot now looked like a great tuft of plants. Walking around the forest, she waited for darkness. Then she padded to the center of a clearing, nestled herself between some rocks, and became part of the landscape. A few hours later, the sky was brightening, the fog was lifting, and the nighttime animals were slinking home. The daytime animals were beginning to stir, and it was just an ordinary morning on the island. However, there was that new tuft of plants in one of the forest clearings. Only the bees had noticed the tuft. They buzzed around, completely unaware that a robot was hidden beneath. And Roz sat there, right in the open, yet completely unseen, and observed the wilderness around her. She watched flowers slowly turn towards the sun. She listened to rodents crawl through the weeds. She smelled the moist, piney air. She felt worms wiggle against her muddy sides. A week later, the tuft of plants was gone, but there was a new clump of seaweed on the shore. The week after that, the clump of seaweed was gone, but there was a new bramble on the mountain. And then there was a new log on the riverbank and a new rock in the forest.